Hey everyone, welcome to the Hot Revenge community. Are you ready to hear a new, intense story? Get comfortable, because we're starting. This story is told from the perspective of the main female character. I was sitting in a fancy cafe downtown in Seattle. The window beside me reflected the successful life I had built entirely on my own. Across the table was the person who had abandoned me. My mother, Vivian. I hadn't seen her since I was 9, which meant 23 years had passed. She stirred her coffee absent-mindedly. Beside her sat my half-brother Declan, a 19-year-old stranger who slouched in his seat, barely lifting his eyes from his phone. She bypassed all small talk and went straight to the point. "Anley, you're so successful now," she said, though her eyes were empty. "Declan needs college funding. We require $80,000. I stared at her, silent. My half-brother scoffed but didn't bother looking up. "Also, I need a replacement car," he added. "Something worth at least $35,000. I waited, expecting my mother to dismiss his request or at least smile. Instead, she simply nodded in agreement. Shock washed over me. "I am unable to help you," I said at last. Her expression hardened instantly. "I brought you into this world," she hissed. "You owe us this much." I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I refused to make a scene. I simply nodded once, placed $15 on the table, enough for our drinks, and said, "I need to return to work now." My mother looked completely taken aback. She must have expected me to be emotional or argumentative, carefully planning how to manage my fit. She had underestimated me. I rarely lost control like that. I work as a cybersecurity analyst. My days revolve around data, finding patterns, detecting breaches, and preventing vulnerabilities. And today, I had just spotted a significant one. I left the cafe, got into my car, and drove straight to my apartment. My hands were steady on the wheel, my breathing calm, while my mind raced with questions. How had she found me? How did she know my income? How could she demand $80,000? Once inside, I locked the door behind me and went directly to my workstation. I didn't even grab a drink. I powered up my computer. Years ago, I had migrated my father's entire garage operation, his invoices, orders, and taxes, to a secure cloud-based accounting platform. I had done it to ease his administrative burden, allowing him to focus on the shop while I managed it remotely from Seattle. I had built the system myself, wrote all the custom code, and implemented the security framework. I knew every line by heart. Using my administrative access, I retrieved the master records. My chest was cold, not panicked. This was purely calculated. I checked login activity from the past 72 hours and found it immediately. Monday, 9:14 p.m. An unfamiliar IP address. Tracing it revealed a public internet cafe in Seattle, just 3 blocks from the hotel where my mother had stayed. She had checked in 48 hours before our meeting at the cafe. She hadn't just demanded money, she had investigated me thoroughly. The breach was worse than that. The logs showed that the intruder had accessed payroll and bank transfer records, reviewing every payment I had sent to my father over the past 5 years. They had also examined the user profile section containing all my personal information. My name, email, and home address. She hadn't stumbled across me by accident. She had deliberately tracked me down. This was not only a betrayal of me, it was a violation of my father. She had exploited the private finances of the man she abandoned, the man who raised me, all to gain leverage over her own daughter. The sense of betrayal doubled. I glanced at the hardware keylogger on my desk, equipment I used for testing clients' network defenses. Reflecting on the cafe meeting, the arrogance, the demands, I realized this was not just a family conflict. This was a defined security risk. I resolved to use my professional skills to identify every connection, every vulnerability, and permanently block them. Why did I immediately check system logs? Why did suspicion outweigh sadness? Because my life had been shaped by her abandonment. I was 9 when she left. There were no tearful goodbyes, no explanations. I came home from school one Tuesday to find her closet empty. All she left behind was the faint scent of her perfume in the hall and a pile of unpaid bills my father couldn't cover. My father, Arthur, was a good man and a skilled mechanic. But his modest garage in Cleveland consumed him. He began work before sunrise and returned long after I went to bed, smelling of grease and oil, collapsing into his chair at the kitchen table, staring at stacks of invoices. On a good day, he might clear $85, barely enough to cover the mortgage, utilities, and food for both of us. He never complained directly to me, but I saw the weight he carried. Every time he claimed to have already eaten at work so I could have a full meal, I felt it. I began earning money at 14, babysitting, stocking shelves at the corner store, taking any cash job I could find. I realized early on that no one was coming to rescue us. If I wanted a better life, I had to build it myself, line by line, dollar by dollar. Education was my escape. While other teens went to parties, I taught myself coding, mathematics, logical reasoning, data analysis, and cybersecurity. It was entirely logical to me, finding weaknesses and protecting systems from intrusion. The scholarship I earned wasn't just a piece of paper. It was my ticket out. It brought me to Seattle and launched my career. The first time I received a real paycheck as a cybersecurity expert, I sat in my empty apartment and cried. Then I opened my laptop and set up an automatic transfer, $1,200 every month straight into my father's account. He never asked for it and always tried to refuse it, his voice rough with emotion when he said, "This is your hard-earned money. Keep it." But he didn't understand. It wasn't my money. It belonged to him. IT was repayment for every double shift he ever worked. It represented the hydraulic lift he desperately needed for the shop but kept postponing for 10 years. It accounted for every night he was too exhausted to eat, collapsing straight into bed. I wasn't simply sending money. I was trying to repay a debt that had nothing to do with currency and everything to do with sacrifice. A sacrifice my mother never understood and never cared to value. You have to understand why I kept making those payments. It wasn't only because of my deep love for my father. It was the result of growing up where cruelty was normalized. When you mature inside a fundamentally broken system, you don't see it as broken. You accept it as normal. My normal was watching my father struggle and believing it was my responsibility to fix it. My normal was having a mother who was absent and indifferent. My role was assigned early. I was the one who carried responsibility, the one who patched failures, the one who kept the boat afloat. It wasn't a conscious decision. It was simply the reality I lived inside. That is exactly how people exploit you. They don't dump the full weight on you at once. They hand you one small burden at a time until you're carrying everything and no longer remember what it feels like to have empty hands. I was still carrying that weight 2 days after the cafe encounter when my building intercom buzzed. I wasn't expecting anyone. When my mother's face appeared on the small screen, my blood instantly ran cold. Declan stood slightly behind her, visibly irritated. "Anley, please." Her voice crackled through the speaker. "We just want to talk and apologize." Every instinct I relied on to detect phishing schemes and social engineering attacks screamed at me to keep the door locked. But the 9-year-old version of me, the one still hoping her mother would come back, was louder. Against my better judgment, I let them in. The moment they stepped into my condominium, the atmosphere shifted. My mother immediately went into performance mode, her eyes filling with tears as she looked around. "Oh, Anley," she murmured dramatically. "Look at the life you've built. I'm truly, truly sorry. That woman at the cafe wasn't really me. I'm just desperate right now." Meanwhile, my half-brother went straight to the sofa, dropped into it, and pulled out his phone. He looked bored, not desperate. I stayed standing with my arms tightly crossed. "Why are you really here, Mom?" I asked. She opened her mouth to speak, but Declan interrupted. "Hey, where's the bathroom?" he asked without looking up. I pointed down the hall to the left. He stood up and walked down the corridor, but turned right instead. My heart began pounding. "Declan, the bathroom's the other way," I called out. I know, he yelled back. "Just grabbing some water first." My kitchen was nowhere near my home office. My cybersecurity instincts kicked in instantly. Trust your intuition. Verify the facts. I moved quickly down the hall, not running but not slow either. As I approached my office, I heard a faint clicking sound. I rounded the corner and saw Declan hunched over my laptop. It was docked but in sleep mode. He was inserting a small, generic USB stick into the rear port. He hadn't noticed me yet. "What are you doing?" I asked quietly, my voice colder than I intended. He jumped, yanking the device out. "Nothing." "Jesus, you scared me. I was just checking if this was a charger." "That is not a charger," I said, stepping closer and holding out my hand. "Give it to me." "It's just a memory stick," he snapped, trying to hide it in his pocket, but I had already seen it. I recognized the cheap plastic casing and the lack of branding. It was a $10 keylogger, a spyware device that records every keystroke, password, and banking detail before emailing the data to whoever planted it. He hadn't come to apologize. He had come to install a backdoor into my life. I snatched the device from his hand. My mother had followed us down the hall, and the moment she saw my expression, her fake tears vanished. "Ansley, don't overreact," she snapped. "He's just a child. He doesn't even know what that is." "He knows exactly what it is," I replied, my voice shaking with cold fury, not fear. "And so do you. You came here to install spyware on my computer." "Don't be ridiculous," she shot back, the loving mother mask gone. "We only needed to steal my passwords? Drain my accounts." I cut in. "You already hacked my father's business system, and when that wasn't enough, you tried this." I held the keylogger up. "This is not a family visit. This is attempted home invasion. Get out." "You can't speak to me like that," she screamed. "Get out," I repeated. "Both of you. Before I call the police." The threat settled heavily. For the first time, Declan looked genuinely afraid. He grabbed his phone and rushed for the door. My mother lingered, glaring at me with pure hatred. "You'll regret this, Ansley. You're throwing away your family." "You stopped being my family a long time ago," I said calmly as I shut and locked the door behind them. I didn't call the police immediately. Instead, I called my attorney. My hand didn't shake. This was no longer a personal family issue. It was a confirmed criminal breach. I was at my attorney's office within an hour. The small USB device sat on the polished mahogany desk between us. "Walk me through this again," Mark said, leaning forward. I showed him everything. The system logs proving unauthorized access from the internet cafe near my mother's hotel, the sudden demand for $80,000, and the attempted installation of a physical keylogger. Mark reviewed it all carefully. He specialized in corporate litigation and cybercrime, not domestic disputes. "At minimum," he said slowly, "this qualifies as attempted wire fraud. At worst, it's conspiracy to commit multiple felonies. These are not just dysfunctional people. They are criminals." He immediately began filing for an emergency restraining order. That same evening, Mark called me. "The situation is worse than we initially thought," he said. Mark sounded troubled. "I hired a private investigator to look into your mother and her new husband, Declan's father. Declan isn't enrolled in any college. That $80,000 tuition fee does not exist." My legs went weak. "Then why did they demand the money?" I asked. Mark explained. "Her husband has a severe gambling problem. A major one. He owes money to a loan shark. The $80,000 was the amount to prevent him from being physically harmed. Payment was due within a week." Finally, it all clicked. The escalation, the desperation, the nerve of their demand. It made sense. I understood the core psychology behind the attack. The delusion of control that comes from being broke. My mother's entire identity depended on her possessions. The successful life, the nice house, the husband she wanted, it was all a facade. When that facade was threatened, she didn't see herself as asking for help. She felt entitled to my money to preserve her image. My success wasn't mine in her eyes. It was a reserve she could tap to fix her failures. She wasn't begging. She believed she was merely moving funds from an account that belonged to her. That was why she was so audacious. She felt no guilt because she thought my life existed for her convenience. We filed the restraining order immediately. The temporary injunction was approved, and a process server was scheduled to deliver the papers the next morning. I should have felt relief, but I was just exhausted. Sitting on my balcony, watching Seattle turn purple, my phone rang. It was my mother. I nearly ignored it, but my lawyer had told me to record any contact. I hit record and answered on speaker. There was a brief silence, then a raw, ragged sob. Annie. Her voice was tiny. The anger was gone. The desperation was real. Annie, please, you can't do this. I know I lied. I'm sorry. Please. I need the cash. You don't understand what they'll do. They're going to hurt him. They'll break him. Please. It's just $80,000. Nothing for you. Just help me once. I swear I'll pay it back. I listened to the woman who gave birth to me plead for money to save her gambler husband. I searched for pity, a spark of feeling. Nothing. Only cold, empty quiet inside my chest. That is not my problem, Mom, I said. The sobbing stopped immediately. I heard a sharp intake of breath. What? What did you say? That is not my problem, I repeated. Your husband's debts are not my problem. His threats are not my problem. You are not my problem. Silence stretched. Then desperation morphed into rage. How can you be so heartless? She shrieked. I am your mother. I gave you life. You owe me. You owe me. There it was, her final desperate attempt. I leaned forward, my voice calm and sharp. You abandoned me when I was 9. You left me with a good man who worked himself to exhaustion in a garage full of oil and misery while you went off to build a new life. You are not my mother, Vivian. You are just a woman I used to know. Never call me again. I hung up immediately, not waiting for more screaming or crying. I pressed the red button, then went to her contact and pressed block caller. The order was served the next morning. She couldn't call, text, or appear. She was finally blocked from my life, just as she had blocked me from hers. The consequences were swift and quiet. The restraining order was enforced. My mother and her husband, unable to pay their debts, filed for bankruptcy. They lost their house. I later heard that Declan had to get a fast food job to help pay rent on a small apartment. About a month later, my Aunt Carol, my mother's sister, called. Her voice was full of weary sadness. Anley, she said, I know what happened and I need to apologize. For what? I asked. For not intervening sooner. Vivian has always been like this, twisting situations, using people, always casting herself as the victim. We all learned to navigate it, walk on eggshells. We never imagined she would go this far. I'm so sorry, honey. We should have protected you. Her words validated the pain I still carried. I wasn't wrong. I wasn't crazy. After the call, I checked my bank account. The money she tried to take was still safe. I stared at the numbers. It felt heavy, like blood money I didn't want. Then I understood what true justice was. There is the justice of punishment, watching the person who hurt you fall. It feels satisfying, but it's hollow because it keeps you tied to the past. Then there is the justice of growth. This justice looks forward. It isn't about destroying what they built. It's about creating what they tried to ruin. It's taking their weapon and turning it into a seed. I took the funds she had tried to steal and made the calls. 2 weeks later, I flew to Cleveland, to my old high school, a place full of memories of hope and struggle. I met the principal and established the Arthur Foster STEM Scholarship, a full scholarship for a student from a single-parent home pursuing a tech degree. The first recipient was a quiet girl with intense eyes who reminded me of myself. That was my justice, not watching my mother fail, but ensuring another kid like me could thrive. I still send my father $1,200 monthly. But now it feels different. It isn't an obligation. It's a gift. It's love. He's thriving. The shop is stable. We talk every Sunday for an hour, not about problems, but about our lives. My mother taught me what love isn't. My father and the family I chose taught me what it is. What does real family mean to you? Share your stories below, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories about truth, boundaries, and healing.